All right. Can you guys hear me? Oh, hold on. I can't hear you. Oh, you guys are muted. Hold on.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, I got you now.
Okay. Hello, Patrick.
You got me?
Hey, Dave. How you doing? Yep,
Good.
I got you, Mark. I got you both.
Good. Great. Is it okay without the headset
Can you
on?
hear me? Okay, good.
Yeah, Dave, you're good without the headset on, and I'm going to try me without the headset.
Okay.
Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, you're fine. You're a little muted, but it's okay.
Okay.
Keep talking.
I'll keep talking. I'll bring the microphone a little closer, too.
Yeah, that's better, I think.
Okay.
We don't want to get too close to Mark. He's very good looking, but we don't want to have that too tight on him.
Mark went with the warm colors. That's nice.
He did go with the warm colors. Yeah, I wear black all the time, so it's no different for me, but
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, thank you so much for reaching out, and super excited to have you guys be a part of the show and see what you're all about. I told my team already, I said, you guys have to give me some questions. So I got all manner of questions. Some were really good. Some were just really awful. So we'll not keep the awful ones. But I'm super excited to learn more about the project you guys are up to, and hopefully we can help out in any way possible.
how do you generally promote your podcast, Patrick?
We do it just through Facebook. And we got our newsletter as well. We've got like 15,000 people on the newsletter. And then have our people pass it on. So whatever it is that you need. We've been doing it for 10 years. So we've got a pretty good audience.
Yeah, nice. Good. And are you pardon my ignorance, are you the boss of the organization?
Yes, I am. Yeah.
Ah, great. Good on you.
Well, thank you.
Mark, what are you doing? You're going to he's got a mansion he lives in. He goes to a different isolated corner. You still there, Mark? I don't hear you.
He's here. I got it. Say something, Mark.
The internet was too slow where I was set up, so I had to go to a different location in my mansion that's a little bit closer to the router. So
yeah.
I don't like it's not that good of a background, but
no, it's pretty. It's good.
Oh yeah.
I'll show you something, okay, Mark, because you don't have one of these. You have everything else because you beat me in everything else. But
what's this?
This is the Nautilus Triathlon. This is the Ironman 1980. It was owned by Nautilus.
Mm-hmm.
And that, can you see that?
Wow.
The Nautilus shell, I need to glue it back on. And it's missing an L.
Yep.
On the Nautilus. So that was the award back then.
Does it say Ironman anywhere on it?
No, it says Nautilus Triathlon 1980 champion. Wow. Men's division, thank goodness. 2.4 miles swim, 112 miles, like 26.2 mile run. That's it. So I've got lots of pieces that need to be. That's the only thing I actually like that people said, oh, you should have that in your office. So that's in the background.
Well, at least it's the trophy that needs a few pieces glued back on, not your body.
Well, that's beyond repair, as you know.
Yeah.
Anyway, Patrick, it's your show. Mark and I, we can banter a lot. So.
Of course, no, and I appreciate it. I was given all the banter I have with my athletes, it was refreshing to see that you guys are already talking smack to each other, even during the preparation for the podcast. Definitely, that's what I'm kind of hoping to achieve here a little bit as well as, and I think kind of what you are up to a bit is kind of personalizing more of who you are. It's, I think for our community of athletes, you guys occupy a strange space in the Ironman world where you're just these icons, part of our history as a community. But you're still here. You're still part of what we do. So we talk about you in the past tense and the present tense. So it's a real honor to have you here. I was telling my kids, this is the podcast that I'll be telling their kids about. I'm like, this is the episode. So if you're watching that, kids, you found it. This is it. For everybody else who's a listener, this is the podcast. After this, everything goes downhill. The next 10 years of Endurance Nations podcast will be terrible.
Well, I hope not.
So, well, you guys reached out to me, and so everyone knows the history. And what I'm hoping to get to today is a little bit more of the backstory, and bring out a little bit more about the day itself as we dive in. I think we've seen competition in more recent years, sometimes on the men's side, sometimes on the women's side, but I think it really pales in comparison to the battle that the two of you had, kind of step by step across that entire marathon. So why don't you, either one of you can take a first stab at it. Tell us a little bit about the project that you guys are working on for this year, and I'll be certainly pointing people to it as we talk.
Mark, go ahead. You're very eloquent.
Well, my business partner in my coaching, Scott Zagarino, has known Dave and I since the beginning of time, and he has felt like there's been little snippets of our story told about 1989, but there's a whole volume of stories and things that Dave and I had to do to get ready so that we could actually have that epic battle that nobody's ever heard before. And he thought, why don't I approach these guys and see if they're willing to work on putting that down into a number of stories. And so we came up with the concept of writing 10 stories, and each one is going to go up. The first one actually went up this morning, and they're going to go up one a week all the way through Kona this year. And they're just telling some of the behind the scenes details that nobody's ever really heard publicly before. Everybody knows that Dave and I had this side-by-side battle, and on the last hill, that's where the move happened that eventually broke us apart. But there was so much to this story that's never really been told, and we thought, before we get too old and our memories faded and we can't even remember the stories, or we're making them up and we don't even know it, maybe we should put it. So that's the project is called. You'll be able to see it on the website. The website link is 1989thestory.com, and that's where we're going to be posting all the stories. They'll be up there till the end of time, so your grandchildren can they can read them just as well as people today can. So anyway, that's kind of the basic background of it. And Dave, maybe you can kind of kick off a little bit of that first story, which a lot of people don't know, but the real setup for 1989 started the year before at the Ironman in 1988, because neither of us, the day didn't work out the way that either of us had hoped. And so that sort of fueled a lot of what was going to be going on going into 1989.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just say one thing just about, our history coming up to Mark and fill in the details on his side. We had a close race in '87. I was able to catch Mark mile 21 or 22. And I just knew every year that we were going to meet there, that not the odds were against me, but the competition level would rise. And Mark would eventually figure out the loopholes in his preparation that was, pretty much flawless during his career. I mean, unprecedented in his triathlon career. And I don't think anyone else compares even in today's world. I mean, we've got such great athletes, John Frodeno and Gomez and Brownlee brothers. And, the list is pretty extensive, but Mark was good at all distances. So 87, I beat him. 88, I was ready to come back. I thought, I could win number 7. And I knew that in 88, my preparation was good. I developed a little knee issue about 6 weeks prior to the race, and I was wrestling with that even when I flew over a week before the start of the race and tested it in race week. And I kept thinking, gosh, it's not coming around. I ran a little bit in the morning on Friday, the day before the race. I tried it again that night, and a couple close mates of mine were there, and I just told them, I said, I just can't run on this properly. And I'm thinking this is going to come down to the run. We're close on the swim. Mark is always there on the bike. I'm not going to break a 10-minute gap and be able to idle on the run. I said, it's going to come down to the run, and I need to be able to run fast. And I've mentioned this many times, my running form is just so unsightly, but I felt pretty confident in Hawaii on the Ironman. And through the history, I had decent Ironman marathon splits. So I felt as though they were still soft. I was going to run faster in 88. I backed out the night before the race.
And so I heard this news. I don't even remember who found it out or who told me, but I was kind of dreading the race, to be honest, because this was going to be 1988 was going to be my 6th Ironman. I'd been there 5 times. Never once had I won. I could be in the lead at the end of the bike. I could be in the lead halfway through the marathon, as Dave said, in 87, all the way up to the closing miles, but I just couldn't hold it. And I knew inside that I hadn't done anything different in my training that would signal a real jump up. And so I was still kind of going into 88 with the hope of winning, but really having no idea how I was going to do it, because Dave is, you know, he's a guy who set the standard and showed what is possible. All of those years, starting in 1980 when he won his first title. So I was kind of dreading it, I'll be honest, you know, and to go into a world championship dreading it, that's not the proper mindset. You know, that's not the mindset of a champion, certainly. But then I heard that Dave was out, and I thought, oh my God, you know, I looked at the start list and I thought, I have beaten every one of these other guys who is going to be on the start line. This is going to be my year. And little did I know it wasn't going to be my year. I ended up with 3 flat tires. I had 2 spares. So that third flat way out on the Queen K cost me a huge amount of time while I was waiting for the support vehicle to actually get news that I was stuck, and they came and put a new wheel on my bike, and half the gears didn't mesh with my gears. And so it was, you know, I started the marathon almost ready to give up. I ended up finishing the race 5th place, farther out of the lead than any of the other Ironmans that I'd done before. And so, you know, I think a lot of people looked at my race in 1988 and thinking, well, now he's going to be really fired up because, you know, just another one to add the fuel to that disappointment. But by the time I got to the winter of 1989, I had actually made the decision that I wasn't going to go back to Kona. I thought, there's something about that race that's just not for me. You know, maybe it's the heat, the wind, maybe I just don't have the genetics, or I'm certainly not doing the right kind of training. And so I had actually sort of backed away from having that be a goal or a race that I was going to do in 1989. I was going to focus on Nice, focus on racing the ITU World Championships in Avignon, France, which would take place in August, the first ever one of those races. And so there was a lot of other places that I was going to go that I just kind of had that warm and fuzzy feel about thinking about getting ready for it. I don't think Dave knew that I had scratched Kona off of my schedule as I started training January 1989. And actually the first story that we posted today, it's the greatest race that almost never happened. And that's the reason why that title came up.
Wow. I didn't have that premonition that Mark was not going to be there in 89. You know, I'm not talking to him, and certainly I saw him in the 88 race. I knew at the time that he had the 3 flats. He was out of the race. And my sense in the previous years, and including 88 leading up to it, was that there was a level of discontent and lack of confidence in Mark that he didn't have in other races. And I sensed it, you know, as you do with body language when you're racing someone side by side. Is there a break point where all of a sudden, we were talking to Lance the other day, and we all intuitively know, is it the breathing rate? Is it the hip drop? Is it the arm action? What is telling me that right now my competitor is suffering? And quite often I would see this just in little snippets prior to the race in 88, that I felt Mark was not psychologically ready for the race. Even though he did not have the race in 88, and everyone looks on a piece of paper, oh, he got 5th place, Mark just can't figure this thing out. I didn't have this feeling that he was going to bag 89. I felt after that race, I had to be ready in 89. And really my plan, which we kind of talked about in this first article that we're sharing with everyone, is that I needed to be ready early in the spring. I didn't want to get fat and chubby like I normally do. I didn't want to get out of shape. I wanted to do some early season races, and I wanted to do some shorter races where I felt as though I was competitive at one time. And I think, you know, we're not immune to your competitors, nor the journalism that's written about you. And sometimes you just want to squelch them all. So my position in 89, Mark will be there. He will be ready in Kona in 89. I need to be ready earlier in the season to prepare myself for the battle in October 89.
Wow. So you guys, do you end up crossing paths out there then when you're both doing these shorter races? Like what happens? When do you realize that all of a sudden you're going to be there?
Well, let me back up to the very beginning. When I first saw the Ironman on television, ABC Wide Roller Sports February 1982 race. That was the inspiration for me to just go there and see if I could be a finisher. And there was no logical reason why I wanted to do it. I just had this calling, like I have to go there and just see if I can cross that finish line. And as I started back into my training in '89, again, already telling myself, I am not going back to Kona. That's not for me. Each day that I trained, I could feel that calling coming back. It's like, dang it, I thought I was done with this race, you know? Finally, I realized I do have to go back there. But I knew that things had to be different. I mean, they had to be different on a lot of levels. I had to do something different with my training. I had no idea what that was going to be quite yet. And I had to go there and somehow find that self-confidence that Dave knew and sensed and saw in me that was lacking, that I could have it in other places. And I didn't know how I was going to do that either, but I knew that those two pieces had to dramatically change. And then I might have the race that I was hoping for. And so really the goal when I finally, I just surrendered and said, okay, dang it, I'm going back, but I'm going to go back for a different reason. You know, all of those lead up years had really been trying to win it. And the way that I was trying to win it was to embrace the DaveScott mystique and strength and just oozing this solidness that he had when he got off that plane. I mean, you could just see it. And like you said, you know, your competitors, you get a good, you get good at reading them and sensing what's going on. I mean, somebody can say in a press conference they're fit and they're healthy and they're strong and they're confident, but you know whether that's true or not. Dave was just like, you know, he was like rock solid, bigger than life. And part of it is that all of the other guys, we kind of trained together. Dave was kind of the lone wolf doing his thing in Davis. And so we would get little snippets of what he was doing, but nobody really knew for sure. And so in that unknown of how does DaveScott train to be so strong, it takes on this monumental, like superhuman proportion, you know? And so anyway, in '89, I thought, you know what? Dave could win again, and that's fine. But I just have to figure out how to go there and from start to finish, give it a super strong effort without blowing up, have the best race I can, and then I'll walk away. And that was the approach that I went to that race, or that I started preparing for going into it.
Okay. Wow. So I love the thought of you guys taking time off and getting fat and lazy. I don't want to know what that looks like. I can't imagine how terrible that was. It strikes me as interesting. You know, when I think back after your guys' time, when I think about when I first got started, which was like Peter Reed and Tim DeBoom, and you know, people trying to sort of lead these monastic lifestyles. I want and how few of those people in that space are really still involved with our sport. I wonder if there's some level of the competition you have, that relationship that you forged through, you know, just beating each other up for so many years, that has led to your, you know, continued involvement and longevity of the sport. Like how do you feel about that when you look at sort of the other people who are out there today without that mystique, I think, that relationship?
Well, that's a tough question, Patrick. I'm not sure I can answer that properly, and whether I understand it completely. But I think at the time, I was depicted as this, this monk that lived and trained by himself in Northern California, and I knew Mark and my contemporaries were all down south, and so that mystique or that aura was just built because we didn't have the internet. There, you know, people weren't giving reports. There wasn't postings and on and on and on. So people really didn't know what I was doing. And honestly, I didn't really know what they were doing. And I didn't really care. I would hear, fragments of their lifestyle and their rides and their superhuman efforts that they were doing. And I would just kind of filter that out and say, you know, stay on course. I think the other part of it is that, in the training, we're surrounded with, Mark and I both use them. You know, we can use heart rate and power and all the metrics that people are using and measuring and putting beautiful bar graphs on there. But, back in my time, even though, I have a science background, I like all those things, my tools were my mind. and my mind was my driver. And I wore a wristwatch. Sometimes when I ran, I'd look at the clock on the wall when I'd go out and run a 10-mile run and say, hey, yeah, it took me X amount of time, or, you know, I'd look at my last couple of miles or whatever it was. And I because I live in Northern California in Davis, the county roads are all a mile apart. And so I once in a while I'd check those and times up my climbs. But it wasn't, you know, the driver for me was really how hard could I push myself. And I remember some days where I would set my DaveScott world record. No one else would do it, but you know, it was my claim to fame. I'd say, this is amazing, but I really couldn't share it with anyone. So I finished a hard day of training and, okay, that was good. You know, how can I up my game the next day? Because Mark is going to be ready in 89 and I needed to prepare. And that was my mindset in the really in the latter months of 88 and in 89. I just said, I have to be better prepared than I have ever been for October 89. And so that was kind of my mantra. You did ask a question, and Mark, I want you to jump in and probably ask one proper. We did collide in 89 prior to Ironman.
Let's hear about that.
Well, go ahead.
No, that's all right. Go, Mark.
It was at the Gold Coast at the World Cup Triathlon on the Gold Coast. It was a long distance race. I think 3K swim, 130K bike, and then a 30K run. And so it was long, you know, but it wasn't Ironman, but it was long. It definitely wasn't a race that's going to test your speed. It was going to test more your ability to stay on track. And so I had actually gone down to New Zealand right in the middle, dead of winter that year, and was down there for 6 weeks training with Scott Molina and a couple other folks. And I think that kind of became my getaway, psychologically boosting, fortifying training experience. Because all of a sudden, you know, in 1989, when I flew to New Zealand, my entire life up in North America basically ceased to exist because there was no internet, there's no social media, there weren't laptops. You know, I don't even think I had a cell phone at that point. I don't know if there were cell phones back then, but anyway, so life was so simple. You know, I'd get up in the morning and it's like, what do I want to do today? I think I'll train, because that's all I had. And in that simplicity, training in this incredibly inspiring environment on the South Island outside of Christchurch, I was able to put in training that I had never in a million years imagined that I could do and absorb. And all of a sudden I realized, you know what, I haven't focused right. I let my life become so distracted with other things that really have negative impacts on my ability to get ready for these key races. And so during those 6 weeks, all of a sudden one of those light bulb pieces went on, like, this is the kind of training that I'm going to need to do to get ready to hopefully have that race that I had dreamed about for many years in Kona. In April that year, there was this race. It was the first time that Dave and I were really going to be able to test everything out on a distance race, on a tough course in a hot climate, to kind of see where both of our training was at. I knew that I was in better shape than I normally was at that point of the year. Dave obviously was saying, no more fat guy, I'm going to be fit by, you know, April. And so he actually was out of the water with Rick Wells, who was one of the best swimmers ever in the sport. I got gapped. I think I came out in 11th place. I'm not sure the time gap, but you know, Dave was off. He was on the bike. As I was coming out of the transition area, I was trying to unrack my bike. I smashed into a photographer. My bike pump, there was no quick fills or anything like that. My bike pump got knocked off my bike. It was kind of hanging, dangling, and I ripped it off because I thought, I'm not going to need this thing. 46 or 47 minutes into that race, I got a flat tire, and I'm thinking, okay, last October I got 3 flats. Wasn't the third one the charm? Now I've got number 4, and so I had to wait. Fortunately, there were race officials right there. They had an extra pump. They gave it to me, and I lost about 3 minutes, which was like, okay, just get back on track. I worked my way back up with came into the transition area, I was told that Dave was a little over 2 minutes ahead of me. I think 2:20 or something like that. And he was first off the bike, by the way, just blowing away everybody on the bike. Amazing bike ride. But then on the run, I started making up chunks of time right away. I think in the first 11K, I'd made up almost 2 minutes. And so it was just a matter of time before I was able to finally, make that move and go by Dave. And the thing that was most important for me on that race is that I felt this strength that I had never felt before. And I knew it was partly a fitness strength, and it was also partly something in my mind had gotten stronger down in New Zealand. And it's like I could just shut off that voice that can talk during the races, that destroys our motivation. It's too hot, it's too long, DaveScott, he's too far ahead, lost my bike pump, I got a flat, and I was in that quiet space so much more of the race, even when I had these little challenges along the way. And that was a very significant change for me going into that one.
Wow. Okay. Well, that's April. That's 6 months before Kona, and like a million things could happen, even though you may not know about it in the non-digital age. So Dave, when you left that race and said, wow, Mark's coming on strong, what was going through your head? You knew he was kind of chipping away incrementally, iteration by iteration. Did you make any changes to your training at that point?
No, I thought there was no need to panic. There certainly was a heightened awareness of Mark's amazing race. And I think a lot of people, and this was actually pointed out, Mark and I had talked about this. I don't recall, a guy was from Sweden, ex-athlete, and he goes, do you know what your run splits were in that 30K in the Gold Coast in 1989? I'm going, no, I don't. But I knew Mark ran real fast. And I had a solid run. I was happy with my run. I was not happy coming in second, but I had heard the splits, and Mark was making up time, and I thought, I'm going to run with him when he comes by me. And I think I ran with him for about a quarter of a step. He blew by me. I think, Mark, your pace that in that 30K was 5:26 miles. And that's rocketing. A lot of people struggle with that in 10K. So it was extremely fast. 1:38 or 1:39 for 30K is off the bike was a magnificent run. I felt I was strong. My response was, and we don't need to go through every segment of this, but I had raced a couple times before that, Mark, and I had raced in St. Croix, and no one really knows Mark got 3 flats in Kona. I crashed the day before the race in St. Croix. I was ready to race in St. Croix, and my hip was so sore. I remember lining up thinking, oh man, don't bump me, this thing is raw. I still have a scar 30 years later on my hip from that crash in St. Croix. Mark won that race. We flew over a week later, did Gold Coast. So coming back to your question, I felt, I had 2 good races, 2 Olympic distance wins that I had. We met in St. Croix, did poorly. Mark won again in Gold Coast. And my response was not what you just asked me, was that stay on course, be confident, keep training. Mark is certainly bolstered by this, great 30K run and victory with a stellar field. But as you said, Patrick, we had a long time before we got to October. And I knew that Mark's fitness would come up, and I knew mine would as well. And that's what I was hedging on, is maintain what you're doing. You've done well. Confidence is still there. And, quietly, your arch rival is breathing down your socks.
Wow. I think, I do think one of my athletes was asking me, the world was different back then for triathlon. There was a lot of short course racing, and there was a lot of money in that racing as well. For those folks. And so you did come across one another really frequently. And I feel like that's really not the case anymore, especially outside of Europe. Some of these athletes don't meet, ever the way the structure is set up until they get to Kona or unless they do a big race in Europe together. And so I think the nature of the community of elite athletes, I think, has really changed. And I think that's one of the reasons why we don't have that same level of sustained competition that we've seen in the past. And I think that really sort of is unfortunate, because I think that's part of what makes the race so special. So I did have a question for you. So with all these races going on around the world, for most of us today, we think about Kona as the pinnacle, as the, one of the hardest races out there with the conditions and the competition and so on. But with your experience traveling all over, I'd be curious to know what you thought, was just the venue that, people didn't really talk about, but were just not dreading it from a competition standpoint, but from a, oh my God, this is just going to be the hardest day ever standpoint.
Well, one of my favorite places to race outside of Kona was in Nice, France. I raced that event 10 times, won it 10 times. It's going to be the site of the 70.3 Worlds this year, coming up in a couple of weeks. Both Dave and I will be there as brand ambassadors for Ironman and telling stories about our careers and hopefully getting people fired up for what really is one of the historic places for triathlon in the world. Mm-hmm. And you commented that we did race each other a lot more than probably guys do now, which is true. And so there was perhaps less surprises because we knew each other's strengths and weaknesses, and we knew the races that, Dave probably had a better chance of winning, or the ones that I had a better chance of winning. Ironically, after that race on the Gold Coast in April, our journeys really kind of took completely different paths. After that, I started focusing on the ITU Worlds, cut out all my long distance training. That race, I think, was going to be August 6th. Mm-hmm. I did end up winning that race. But the thing that happened the week before that I didn't hear about until after I was just done with Avignon is that Dave had raced at Japan Ironman, and his time was 8 hours and 1 minute. He almost broke that 8 hour barrier, and that was almost a half hour faster than he had gone in Kona. And Japan, Ironman Japan, it's a tough race because it's very hot, it's very humid, it's not fast, and so it was so far off the charts that I said the course had to be short. There's no way he could go 8:01. And I thought, or maybe it was like really cool and it wasn't humid. It was 100% humidity. I mean, it was the same as it always was. And it was such a leap forward that I could not even wrap my brain around it. So it's like, it almost didn't worry me because it was like somebody had told me something in a foreign language and I didn't quite understand it. Not in a million years could I see myself going 8:01 at that point anyway. So all of a sudden, here I had this great short distance race, which was great, but I had let Ironman training go for almost 8 weeks. And all of a sudden I see Dave has done an 8:01. And as he said, his fitness is going to keep getting better throughout the year. I'm thinking, holy guacamole, what's he going to put together in Kona? So I was starting to question things once again.
Wow. That's so crazy. I think about all these news flashes coming in like messages in a bottle. Nowadays, I can't go on Strava without getting hit with like 90 updates from all the pro athletes doing whatever they're doing. Probably in some way having that, ability to focus or to just do your own thing was probably a strength in some way. I mean, you both work with athletes now. Do you feel that, sometimes these elite athletes that you're working with, almost knowing too much is part of the problem in terms of helping them reach their potentials?
I don't work with a lot of the elites anymore, Patrick. I think, one, and I'm not stereotyping or categorizing, there's a lot of wonderful people that are racing, and Mark and I both have mutual admiration for a lot of the pros, both men and women. The difficulty is that they're type A. They're following the Dave and Mark mantra, and they're driven, and they're very opinionated, and it takes a lot of time and energy, and on and on and on. So my course, I have the DaveScott Tri Club. It's a membership-based program. We're going to offer a 30-day thing from your podcast, and they're all amateurs right now. I have about 8 of them that are going to Nice World Championships. I've got 6 or 7 that are going to Kona as well, and I enjoy trying to unravel their issues that they have, but not really maybe spending as much time with the elites as I used to. And I fortunately, I had a great opportunity. I coached Chrissy Wellington and advised Craig Alexander and Julie Divins and Rachel Joyce. And, I loved doing it. But at the same time, I thought, wow, this this is aging me quickly. And there was many times where we butted heads. I mean, I remember Christy, she was brutal, amazing athlete, phenomenal. Her record's unprecedented, 13 Ironmans and 13 wins, but she was bullheaded. We're great friends today.
That's true. How about you, Mark? Do you think you would have been able to, if we, had a time machine to focus like you needed to focus to get in that mindset if you've been, deluged by Twitter and Facebook updates? I mean, with Dave being so handsome, he would have been all over the social media.
Oh yeah. Well, that's a given, Patrick. Yeah, no, it's really, really charming. I've turned the lights down here tonight.
Yeah. We'd have to travel with our makeup artist, and that on top of a massage therapist and a bike mechanic. It's brutal. But it was interesting because I had a talk with Tim O'Donnell about a year ago, and I was recounting to him how I really loved the time after Kona was done before I started training again in January, because it was this buffer of at least 2 months where I didn't have to focus on training. I could just let everything go. I could do maintenance stuff to just enjoy being outside and running and surfing or whatever I was doing, but I didn't have to. I got a real break, and it was a physical break, but also a mental break to just let things go. And he said, we don't get that time anymore. He said, I have to be busy with Instagram and all the social media stuff basically every week of the year. There is no break. And it really struck me. And I ended up writing an article titled something along the lines of, is social media disrupting your recovery? Mm-hmm. Because a lot of recovery is about giving yourself a rest. And if you might be sitting on the couch, right? But if you're scrolling and reading and posting, your brain is still working at high capacity. And so you're not letting that mental strength just gel and to get stronger. And so it would have been very, very difficult to get ready in the way that I did in today's modern times. And I would have really had to be disciplined about just letting all that stuff go. One of the things that I learned about Dave last year that he shared with me is that he never raced with any device. He didn't have a heart rate monitor. He didn't have his watch. He didn't have anything. And it was all by feel. And I think that's actually one aspect of fitness and training that both he and I had to develop, because we didn't have a lot of numbers to tell us much. Mm-hmm. Maybe we had a few metrics, a few key loops, and I'm 5 minutes faster than I was last week. Sweet, that's great. You're in the pool, you see the 100 times on the clock. But all those weeks in New Zealand and all the weeks after Avignon, I had to every workout go, how am I feeling? Mm-hmm. Am I feeling great? Am I feeling crappy? Can I keep this up tomorrow? Can I keep it up for the next 6 weeks or 7 weeks? There was this real tuning in. And then I also had to decipher the difference between being really tired and being lazy or just dreading something that I knew was going to be painful or long or difficult or challenging. And to somehow, once I saw it was just a dread, leaping over that and somehow embracing it and going, okay, let me just get it done. Mm-hmm. And that is a piece that really played out very well in the race finally in 1989, because there were, when you're racing next to DaveScott, like I said, he's solid. There's no surge or little trick I can do that's going to have him go, oh, I can't do it no more. You go take it. That's not going to happen. And so I had to continually just keep bringing myself back to that point of like, stick with this, stick with it. And that's a skill that doesn't just pop into your being on race day. It's something that has to be worked on over and over and over and over in your training.
Wow. I agree 100%. We talk about our winter training for our athletes. I talk about we call it the out season, not the off season. And I'll tell people, you're developing your physical strength, but you're also building what we call like that mental six pack, right? That toughness to do the work, and not saying do 5-hour trainer rides in December, but that level of discipline, the familiarity, not only with your own limits, but about doing the work, and people, I think one of my favorite sayings, I can't remember who said it, it was like, might have been Gordo Byrne. I think, like what's the best training, protocol like for the, and he's like, whatever gets you out the door, like whatever makes you have to go do it. You can't not do it, and you've got something that's telling you all the time. I did have a couple of questions from my athletes, if I could bring some of those in. And, they focus a lot on my community, I think is very indicative of the triathlon space in general, which I think is generally trending to the older side as well. And so there were some questions that people had specifically. One of them was, if you two had to go back and battle today, if they said, all right, this is it, we're going to settle it once and for all. Bud Light comes back and says, we're going to fix your trophy with some glue, and we're going to make you go at it. What, now with the benefit of knowing what you know, not just about each other, but really sort of as older athletes and still being healthy and being at it, what would you necessarily do differently? Like, could you still go out and do 400-mile weeks on the bike or 80-mile weeks on the run? Well, I would just be curious to know one or two things from each of you, how you would go about trying to, be at your best for that challenge, given where you are today.
Dave, you're the oldest. Take it away, man.
Yeah, no, I am the eldest in this trio. Thank you, Mark. That's a big question. I think a lot of people depicted me as, living this solitary life, doing massive miles, and and I get up out of bed every day and just fire myself up and put in a 6 to 8 hour training day, and that's not really the case. I mean, I wrestled with the psychological part of just kind of being on my game and setting the bar high enough. And I said this to Mark. I said, it's like an alcoholic. It's all or nothing. So if I couldn't do it at the level I wanted to do it, I wouldn't do it. It was sort of self-inflicted abuse. To get to your question, Patrick, I think if I had the opportunity, I would surround myself like Mark did with San Diego, or going to New Zealand and training with Scott. Having training partners is magic. And I think, all of us know the difficulty in a swim session is to try to pull it off by yourself. I did lots and lots of swim sessions, actually looking at the clock, looking at my 100 pace, and here we go, I'm going to do 6 500s on a send off, and I want to hold them all here. And I did a lot of those workouts. But boy, if I had a group of people to train with, which I know is at different times, it was such a luxury. You could get through an hour and a half swim workout and say that was difficult. There was periods where I was called the barometer of discomfort. The discomfort level was quite high. It's painful when you're out of shape. Mm-hmm. So that part of it, the difficulty was fine, but it was nourishing. Mm-hmm. So I would surround myself with people. I would go on other group rides. I wouldn't do the volume that I did, but my volume was really pretty finite. It wasn't year round. I had a lot of downtime, as Mark was alluding to, and then quite often I would ramp everything up. I'd ramp up my quality, I'd ramp up my volume, which I don't think is the right way to do it for a lot of people at the end of the year, but I was fresh going into it. And I kind of did that. When Mark was talking about going to Avignon, in this third piece that we have written, and I actually left this out. I was thinking about it. My wife at the time, Anna, was pregnant with my first son, and I said, I need to go to Boulder and train. And we rented a place in Boulder. It was hot and blazes in the early part of the summer leading up to Ironman Japan. And we spent 6 weeks. She was 7th or 8th month pregnancy because Ryan was due, he was born August 5th. So we came out to Boulder. I said, I'm going to have 6 weeks here. I'd spent some time because my sister had been here, and Mark and Scott and some of the other boys had gravitated out to Boulder. And I said, it's a beautiful training place. I want to be here. So that kind of prepared me for Ironman Japan. But post Japan, my son was born. That was my focus. Like, I've got this new baby. And then I was reminded, which, we can talk about, or it'll certainly be in one of the stories, that I better get going because MarkAllen's going to be ready for you, Dave, in October. So you can't look at your baby or hold him anymore. Go out and exercise. Anyway, I don't think I answered your question. I don't even remember what it was. That was from a viewer, Patrick. Could they restate that? Mark, why don't you put more eloquent? He's much brighter, so maybe he can fill in the holes.
Yeah, people ask me, would you ever go back to Kona? And I go, I'd love to go back and watch like I do every year. And that's not what I'm asking. Would you race it? And I go, maybe next lifetime. If I really was going to go back, the biggest challenge would be starting from where I'm actually at with my fitness. Mm-hmm. Because since I've retired, I've it's taken a while, but I've worked at different levels of exercise to try and figure out what is going to be a level of exercising that maintains my health and gives me the most vitality and longevity out of this whole journey of athletics and exercising that I can. And that level is very different than what it would take for me to be ready for an Ironman. I mean, I don't think anybody just sits around and does 100, 150 mile bike rides just to stay fit and healthy. You know, you do that because you have a real purpose. And in my mind, I'm just as fast and as I ever was. And so, you know, I'll be running along. I don't measure or monitor anything anymore, but I just go by feel. I'll be running along thinking, this is probably, I know it's slower, but not that much slower than when I raced. And then all of a sudden, here comes, you know, somebody who's completely out of shape, looking like they're running so slowly, passing me like I'm standing still. And I think, well, maybe my form looks good, if nothing else, you know? So
I don't think so.
Yeah, probably not. So anyway,
it did look good.
If somebody did something a long time ago and then they want to come back and re-experience it, the main thing is starting from where they're at now, not where they were back then, and also adapting, as Dave said, the volume and everything to match your body at the age that you're at. It's simple on the surface. A lot of people find it challenging because they want to live 30 years ago when now it's, you know, they're twice the age that they were then.
I think there's some transfer there. You mentioned, both of you, sort of about being in touch with your bodies and your capacity, knowing when to rest, sort of having that general fluency with your potential and how much recovery you need that's still pertinent today. You mentioned feeling fast on that run, Mark. I want to know, like, some of those splits that you and your fellow competitors threw down in the day are still so insane. We have so much technology now. It's ridiculous, right? You know, golf balls can fly so far. Like, you know, helmets are dimpled. Like the new skin suit I got last year, now I wouldn't even, you know, wash my dog with it because it doesn't have, you know, whatever nylon stitching, you know, from outer space. How is it possible that some of those times are still being, you know, chipped away at, or that we're still not that much closer to it? When you look at, compare it to, say, other sports like the hour time trial on the bike, which I know is not the same, or the marathon distance. So we see all of those advances.
I think it's just a testament to a lot of what Dave and I have been talking about, is that racing in Kona it's partly about your fitness, and it's partly about your mental strength and fortitude. It's about your ability to focus, not only on race day, but how do you focus in your training so that you get the most out of it. Mm-hmm. And you can't measure that type of stuff. You know, how do you measure passion? How do you measure motivation? How do you associate a number with something that scares the heck out of you? You know, how do you lower that number? And these were all things that Dave and I worked on, maybe not even necessarily by plan, but just because of the way things are set up. And so that's a huge part of the Ironman recipe to put together a great race in Hawaii. You need physical conditioning. You need that mental, this is Dave's word that he loves to use all the time, tenacity. You know, I love it.
That's excellent.
Yeah. I learned that word from you. I had to look it up first time.
That's enough thesaurus. I think, I mean, one of the things, Patrick, I think going into to Ironman, and obviously Mark figured out the game, was, Mark and I have a good rapport with all the athletes, I would say. And, you know, we talk to them, and some of the athletes that have these incredible races throughout the year, you want them to be successful in Kona, but maybe it's that little seed of doubt that you see as a 60-plus-year-old couple, and you see them, gee, they're not that strong mentally right now. And I have heard this many, many times. I'm sure Mark has as well. I hope I can get through the run. I hope I survive on the run. It's windy. It's hot. I've been dehydrated before. And so there's this huge amount of self-doubt where the run times in the 70.3 races by the athletes now, and just talking about the men, are extraordinary. But they're not laying down the times in Kona getting off the bike. And I see this huge lack of confidence with a lot of the athletes that should have this confidence. And as Mark said, it's solidified in your training. You have to go into the race knowing that you're going to have a good race, but how good is it going to be? And I never had a doubt that, oh, I'm going to have a bad race because I didn't really feel great in the last 10 days. I'd say, you know, it's Kona. I'm going to have a great race. Mark's going to be ready to race. The other competitors are going to be ready. And I don't sense this with a lot of athletes. Can you really win this race, and can you lay down the best performance? That is within your biochemistry and your mindset to do that. And there's only a few athletes that I feel in Kona really have that capability of doing it. I mean, obviously you can reflect on the champions. They figured it out. The ones that are nibbling there and they keep getting a little bit faster, you better watch for them, because that run is coming down, and all of a sudden they're going to be saying, you know what? I don't care where they are on the run. I'm going to chase them down. And Patrick Longa is a good example. A couple of years ago, way behind, steady pace, beautiful run, wins the race. He knows how to win. Everyone's afraid of him. And I think, Mark, we had this. There was and I didn't say this arrogantly, and I think it's a funny thing. It'll come up in our storyline here, Patrick. There was a press conference before '89. Someone had asked in the press. We were there. Dave, what can you do in this race? And I remember I'm just thinking to myself, I'm not thinking about MarkAllen or anyone else. Oh, that's a good question. I was 50 minutes and 20 seconds for a lot of races on the swim. I said, God, I'd like to break 50 for once. So I said, 50 minutes on the swim. What can you do on the bike? Well, at that time, the standard was really riding 25 miles an hour for 112 miles, 180K. That was real fast. So 435 or 436. And I said, that's what I'm capable of doing. Oh, how about the marathon? And I know in Japan, with other things on my mind, I'd run 245, and it was very hot and humid that day, and I went 801. I kept thinking, there's 237.30 is a 6-minute pace, 345 per K. I said, that's very doable. So I think I stated this in the press conference, 15 minutes, 435, 237.30. And I think all the other athletes except Mark said, oh man, I'm out. I'm out of this game. And I'm always curious, I don't know if Mark had earplugs in at the time, but he was ready to race. And I think the other athletes came along for the ride. I'll just add one more thing, because I know I've been talking too long. I didn't know anyone else was on the bike, and I didn't know this until about 10 years ago. And I looked at the splits. We're all about the same, 437, I think, or 439, Mark, a little slower than 25 miles an hour. But there were 3 or 4 other guys that were in this pack. I never saw them. Wolfgang was in the lead by 2 to 3 minutes. I was leading this pack, and I didn't know they were there. I knew Mark was there. I knew he was there the whole time.
Mm-hmm. 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 That's crazy. Well, I think, thinking about those splits, we have a gentleman on our team who was doing his first 100-mile race, and it turns out that he only did like 99.8 miles. And so he turned his medal back in. He mailed it back to the race director because he didn't do it. Not only like 8 guys did this race. So he's one of those super type A people. And he wanted to know, Mark, how you felt about Patrick Lange getting that, the official world record run time, even though they didn't count your transition time, which they estimated to be like, probably 1:15, which I think is probably one of the fastest T2s I've ever heard of for an Ironman regardless. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, it's just sort of the way the cards lie. Our split was our split. I was 240.04. Dave was just a little bit behind that. That split included our transition from bike to run, which, obviously, actually, this is a great story. When Patrick broke the record the first time, the marathon record, he was about 15 seconds faster than my time. He went just under 240. First guy to officially run under 240 in the marathon split in Kona. And first of all, when Mike Riley told him that he'd done that, he turned to me and he apologized. He goes, "I'm sorry for breaking your record." And then he goes, and then he figured it out and he goes, "I know my transition was longer than 15 seconds. He was sort of admitting that, yeah, he has the official record, but there's a little bit of question mark here. But the main thing is just that he's now where we were 30 years ago, and even maybe a little bit faster. I mean, his time last year was way faster than anything we went. Right. First guy under 8 hours in Kona. But it's taken a long time for guys to actually get there. And, Dave was talking about the press conference where he was saying, 6-minute pace, 237, whatever it's going to be. And I was thinking, yeah, I figured I went 5:26 pace for 30K, you add another 12K. Sure, I should be able to do that. And to actually bring this around to the old guy coming back story, question. A couple of years ago, it was in February, I was giving a talk in Boston, and I flew in. It was freezing cold. I wanted to do a little bit of a workout, so I went down to the health club gym in the hotel, hopped on a treadmill, and I was running along, and I was thinking, 240. We were going around 6:10s, averaging 6:10 miles. That was the average, which meant that some of them certainly were faster than that. And I thought, I wonder what a 6:10 mile feels like. And so I kept pressing the plus button, because I wasn't running anywhere near it. Finally, I got it down to a 6:10 mile, and I held it for a minute, and I was ready to blow up. And I thought, how did we do that? How did we do that? And I think it's just a testament to, both Dave and I were super fit. We were ready, and everything gelled into this race that neither of us could have come close to having without the other one there. And it just, both of our strengths propelled us even further than we could have ever gone on our own. And I think that was one of the things that set that race apart from pretty much any other one that we've seen since then. There's never been that head-to-head kind of battle like we had, and we were enveloped in this energy. Third place was over 3 miles behind us at the finish line. So we were in a completely different place.
Unbelievable. I can't imagine the energy, even without all of the technology down there. Even the energy now at Kona, with the race being what it is so high. I think for me, as we wrap this up, one of my favorite parts about this, I think people think about Kona as this place where it's mystical. You don't know that sometimes it's fast, sometimes it's slow. It's always challenging in a unique way. They talk about, the forces of the island and Madame Pele, but what I've really learned from you guys today, it's just as much what you get from each other, and that the spirit of competition. And I think a lot of times we overlook that with our sport being such a solitary endeavor. That you're right. I think absent the technology and the advances and the things that we know now, your competitive spirits, the challenge you'd set forth for each other, and that you played out, even though you weren't having conversations. I wonder if we went back in time and the two of you now stood on the sidelines and the two of you then ran by, not talking to each other for a year, and you'd be like, are those two guys talk? Do they look? Those two guys are talking to each other. No effing way. There's no way. Anyway.
Well, we didn't talk about the race and the dynamics of the race for a long time. My recollection, Mark, was it was 10 years later. We were in LA, or maybe it was after that, and all of a sudden Mark was reciting certain things that went through his mind and body during that race, and I'm kind of perplexed, really. And I mean, one of the things was just the irregularity of my running style and the pacing. I always thought, well, I'm just like a clock. I'm like a metronome. And thinking about it, I don't run like that at all. If there's a little downhill, I'll just, try to explode on that downhill. And even going back to 89, that was kind of my tactic. If we were together, I was going to get Mark at the top of Palani Hill, but he had a different move.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll point everyone to 1989thestory.com. They can read all the installments. And those will be coming out week by week, you said, all the way through the race. Is that right?
Yeah, the first one posted this morning, so you can go on there, check it out. And there's 9 more to come. Each one will be telling you stuff that I'm sure you probably never heard before. And if you might have heard a little snippet of it, there's going to be a lot more detail. And I think what's important about it is just going to be to really see that there's many different ways to get to the same place. Dave and I are obviously different people. We had different approaches, but both approaches really worked. And then ultimately, as you're reading through these stories, just think about the fact that here we are 30 years later, and we're actually collaborating on this. And I think it's a testament, like you said, to just maybe how the dynamic of racing was back when we were at the peak of our game. It was certainly, we had a great rivalry. It was very intense. We weren't we weren't calling each other up to wish each other a happy birthday or anything, but you know, the rivalry was one that was born out of respect for what each other was doing and who each other is as a person. And so I think there's a real healthy way to race people. And I think we were lucky enough to just completely, maybe by accident, fall into that healthy dynamic of pushing each other to levels that still people are talking about today, 30 years later.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's just a great part of our sport, you know, like I think it's such, you know, you guys were, you know, athletic role models then and putting up times that people still dream of today. And here you are sort of redefining what it means to be competitive and to challenge one another, but to do it with respect and to have a great rapport as well. I mean, I'm always struck on the island by how, you know, professional wrestling like the men are with the charades and the acts and the not talking and everything. And then you have the pro women who are, don't get me wrong, are just as competitive, but just have a totally different demeanor and seem so much more accessible on the island than their male counterparts. Like I wonder, I don't know if anyone ever feels truly at home when they're on the island because of the task that they're facing. But I do think that being comfortable in your own skin is a huge part of being successful. So I look forward to learning more about these stories and sharing them. You know, if you guys are doing stuff on the Big Island as well, would love to, you know, culminate that with you guys when you're there. Whatever that is, I'll be there as well. It'd be great to catch up and, you know, kind of put the finishing touches on and do something. Maybe you guys will do the underpants run. I promise I won't.
My underpants are tattered, Patrick. We will be there during Ironman week, though. So it's a busy week coming up in the 7.3 World Championships in the East, and then we'll be obviously there again in Kona.
Okay. All right. Well, great. Well, hopefully we'll see you there on the ground as well, and we'll be following along on the social media stuff. I'll get all this, you know, wrapped up for you guys so you can see it, and I'll help promote it and give you guys anything else you want. I know you sent over some links as well, but if there's anything else you want me to put out, I'm happy to do it to just help promote the story and get it out there. I really appreciate both of you for your time and your candor. It's been really reinvigorating, I think, for me just to hear the stories behind the scenes and see you guys together. And I look forward to learning more about, you know, what we think we already know. You can help us fill in those gaps. It'll be exciting.
Sounds great, Patrick. Thank you.
Yes, thanks, Patrick. Thanks for your time.
No problem, gentlemen. Thank you so much. I'll be in touch.
We'll see you. Bye-bye.
Okay, cheers. Bye-bye.